Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 5. We are covering module 5, which is chapter 9 and chapter 10. So we'll be taking a look at both prosocial behavior and aggression, which are kind of opposite of one another. And some of the concepts that you're going to be learning about in prosocial behavior will actually help to understand aggression a little bit more. So definitely read these chapters in order. Taking a look at our to-do list here, it's pretty standard for this week. The only difference is that I have added an extra credit opportunity, so I'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, let's cover the chapter objectives. So if we dive into chapter 9 with prosocial behavior, you're going to be taking a look at what is that term, prosocial behavior, as well as what does altruism mean. Altruism is, by its very definition, an act of prosocial behavior, but there's a lot of different key components that are involved. The beginning of the chapter will take a look at prosocial behavior when it comes to emergency situations. How do people respond? When or where do they get involved? Or do they get involved? To what degree? And we'll be taking a look at this through the real life murder of Kitty Genovese, what happens there, what was the public response there, and how that led to sort of this whole area of research exploding in bystander intervention. So it's the work of Lotney and Darley, and they talk about people's different responses when an emergency is happening, sort of the different steps people in their heads kind of walk through of what to do. And a big key component that dictates what people are going to do are not only the situational variables, but other motivational factors that are either going to increase the chances that somebody's going to respond, or maybe even inhibit the chances that someone is going to respond. And those can be many different things, right, within the situational and motivational aspects. So mood, what models are present that one's watching. We learned that just from looking at conformity, right, that models make a difference on how we respond when we see someone else acting in a certain way. It does affect us. Who we're around in particular, how close we are to them, etc., is going to affect it. But in bystander intervention, a big thing that appears is what's called diffusion of responsibility. So basically, the more people present, given an emergency type of situation or something uncertain that's happening, unfamiliar to a person, we're more likely to not do anything. We think, oh, well, someone else will take action, somebody else will do something. Thus, the responsibility for jumping in and doing anything is diffused amongst the various people that might be viewing it or watching it. So we'll take a look at that, and also the role of pluralistic ignorance and its involvement in diffusion of responsibility. Now, this is a concept we talked about earlier. I believe it was back in the cognitive chapter, social cognition. We looked at pluralistic ignorance and how sometimes we think we know what everyone's response is or what everyone would do, when in actuality we're kind of wrong as to what the norm is. But this is all influenced by something called empathy. So we're going to dive into empathy a little bit in this chapter. What is it? How does it develop? And how does it differ from person to person? We're going to be looking at a few different models or hypotheses, if you will, for what empathy and getting involved in prosocial behavior looks like. So the empathy altruism hypothesis, the negative state relief model, the empathetic joy hypothesis, and kin selection theory. These are all just various models for what helping might look like, or the reasons behind why people help, right? Because not all helping behavior is created equal. Some people help merely for the sake of wanting to do something kind for someone else. Some people help out of guilt. If they didn't act, they would feel guilty. Some people help to get recognition or to get a pat on the back, right? So all of these things play a role. And so we'll be looking at the different examples of that. Also the role of gratitude, and it's just a huge component that goes into helping behavior. And we'll look at particular instances such as catastrophes and how and why catastrophes bring about such a response from people. Usually when there's a hurricane or a natural disaster, people really jump to responding. And we see people just helping so much more so. Well, why is that the case? Why does it take a natural disaster for us to help fellow mankind, right? So we'll be looking a little bit at that, as well as some personality factors that are involved in empathy in what's called an altruistic personality. Some people's motives for helping are just very altruistic. They don't want anything out of it. They don't expect anything out of it. They truly just want to help. We'll also look at some different motives for volunteering. Now, volunteering is a little different from obviously bystander intervention or helping in an emergency situation. Volunteering is something that probably everyone has done at some point in their life. I mean, we're told, growing up that, you need to volunteer. It's good. Looks good on your resume. Or maybe your families were involved in different projects where volunteering was an option. So what does that look like? How do agencies that involve a lot of volunteers, how do they select their volunteers? How do they keep them? How do they get people to volunteer? That's kind of like the golden question. And some different variables like egoism, self-interest, moral integrity, and moral hypocrisy that can play a role in volunteering behavior. So really that kind of sums it up. I mean, you can go ahead and look at each one of these and kind of fill in the blanks for each one as you're going about reading. This is going to set the stage for the aggression chapter, which is a lot of theory because everyone has a different take on aggression. There's biological components, there's environmental variables, there's modeling, and so a lot of different perspectives are given on aggression. So we are going to view some of those, such as Freud and Lorenz, an evolutionary perspective in terms of understanding how aggression develops. We'll also be looking at some other theories of aggression, like the general aggression model and the frustration aggression hypothesis, which is a little bit more contemporary than Freud and Lorenz, but not necessarily completely accurate. And so then we'll move on into excitation transfer theory and kind of what's operating there in terms of outward variables in the environment that get us kind of going. Think of being in a crowd of people. If you're in a crowd of people who are excited, that tends to transfer onto you, even though internally you may not feel excited. Just being around people can make that happen. So that plays a good role in how we act too. We'll also take a look at violence and the media's role in that, as well as pornography, and just the links between those three. So important. And things like cultures of honor that might involve sexual jealousy. This can play a role in triggering aggression. And so all of that kind of sets the stage then for understanding it. And then we take a look at some personal variables. So those are all kind of, all those things I've just talked about are all environmental sorts of models and triggers of aggression. And then there's also personality differences. So things like type A behavior pattern, people who just have more hostility, and that could be learned as well as just part of their biology. We do see gender differences in aggression. We know that external variables like the temperature and alcohol obviously can influence aggression levels. So all of those are important. And then we will focus a little bit on the aspect of bullying, the role of the victim, and then the role of the bully. How can we reduce bullying behavior, as well as bullying behavior that takes place in the workplace, right? Between adults. Often we think that bullying ends when we leave the playground, but evidently it does not. It carries into adulthood and can be pretty pervasive. So we'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at some different things that might act as a deterrent to violence. How can we help people channel aggression in more helpful ways other than resorting to violence? Is punishment the answer? How well does that work? Catharsis hypothesis, can I channel my aggression in a healthier way? Does that work? And just some other models, cognitive and non-cognitive, some more behavioral, that have been found to be helpful in the reduction of aggression. All right, so your article readings this week are here, Article 28 and 31. Here are your lecture slides. I want to take a minute to go through the various videos. I do hope that you're reading the chapters first and then hitting the videos, okay, and watching all of them. I know sometimes there's a lot, but a lot of them are very short clips, very easy to watch, but they play very nicely off of the material in the chapters. So I hand select every video based on concepts I really want to hit home on and zone in on for you. So the first one we're going to be taking a look at is dangerous conformity. When conformity, which we learned about last week, inhibits us from acting, right? And acting in a pro-social way. So sometimes we don't act when we see an emergency or we see something happening because we're conforming to the norms of what we see other people doing. And if other people aren't acting, we're less likely to act. So more on bystander intervention, a little bit on Kitty Genovese here, and how that affects helping behavior. I have a what would you do sort of scenario, mock child abduction, where we see a fake setup of a child being abducted, and it's alarming how people respond. So I'll let you watch that. And then the role of electronic devices, how they've really hurt our ability to be paying attention to our surroundings, and hurt our ability to sometimes step in and help when we need to. And then I have a couple videos on both empathy. I love this one. I always show this one by Brene Brown. Excellent video on empathy. What is it? How to have it. And then a crash course on aggression versus altruism and what the differences are there. I've got some Khan Academy videos, one on altruism and altruistic behavior, and then a really great TED Talk by Abigail Marsh on why some people seem to be more altruistic just by nature than others. Is it nature or is it environment? So it's kind of interesting. A Khan Academy video on aggression, just the basics, some terms there, a lot of terminology. It's going to mimic what's in your book. The 4 basic types of aggression. A different video on what would you do in a scenario with girls being mean to each other and how people respond and take over. And then modeling. We see kids modeling their parents' behavior or older people's behavior. And then finally, this is all those videos are very short. This is the longest video you'll watch, which is America the Rude, and it's only 29 minutes. But you have to log in through the Films on Demand database, which is through the Ely Library, okay, to pull that up. And I've given you instructions there. And again, watching all these videos on Google Chrome or Firefox is going to be the best. Don't use Safari. It's not going to work well. So your discussion will entail all of those things, the readings, the articles, and the videos. And I've posted that here for you, something about helping behavior and why we do it, and then something about violence. So a little bit of each topic. Your exam, and then your extra credit, which you can read all about here. You're going to watch a little video clip of random acts of kindness, and then you're going to do some random acts of kindness for some extra credit. And I hope you can all have fun with that. And that's it for the week. Thanks, everyone.